What am I saying again?
This is MPW,
MPW.
the podcast
with your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today I am really excited to welcome our guest, Manon Grandjean. So Manon is an engineer and a music producer and has worked with so many amazing artists, including Stormzy and one of my absolute favorites, London Grammar, and has also won an MPG Award for the Breakthrough Engineer of the Year. So amazing to have you with us on this episode, Manon.
Hey, Xylo. Nice to be talking to you today. Hello, everyone. And great to be here.
Yeah, no, absolute pleasure. And yeah, it's quite early for you in the morning, so it's coming to the end of my day. So how's your routine been during this lockdown phase?
Well, I would say it's early. I mean, it's 10 o'clock, so it's not that early.
Okay.
But for me, it is. I tend to be more of a night-like person, so I usually start to work a bit later and like sort of work in the evenings. So my studio is called Nocturnal Studios. So
makes so much sense.
And also working with a lot of urban artists, it tends to be on that side of the day, so more like during the night. But yeah, my routine's been, I mean, I don't really have a routine. I just went back freelance, so I've been sort of like really flexible with times, and working from home as well means that you can really organize your day as you want it, really. So I would usually tend to work for a few hours, then have a break, and then work again in the evening. It's been really good, actually, not doing like a full day, like 8 or 9 hours or like continuously. I think it's been really good to, obviously when you're in the studio in a session, you have like short breaks, but you don't have maybe a 3-hour break to sort of refresh your ears a bit and get a bit more perspective. And I think, being at home or being on my own, I certainly made that easier. So it's been okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's funny, this kind of new world that we're living in has been good for some people and bad for some people. But in some ways, I think definitely it gives you the flexibility to kind of work to your own schedule, which is great.
And I think a lot of people had to, including me, had to sort of rethink how they could work. And a lot of people started recording remotely, and I've did a bit of like learning when I was at home and just, update your knowledge or, and just learn something new as well. So I think people took advantage of that despite everything that's, happening.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a great time to have the time to be learning something new. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in some ways it is, and in other ways you've kind of got some added stress, even though you've got more time to kind of be in this situation. But strange world. But so today we are talking about delay, something that I love to use. So very interested to chat about that with you. But before we get to that, I would love to hear a bit more about your journey in production and engineering and how you got to where you are today. So do you want to give us a bit of a background?
Yeah, of course. So I'll keep it short because people are gonna like, all right.
That's always interesting.
The 10-year story. So I studied audio engineering in France, where I'm from, and I always wanted to be an engineer. So I studied. At the end of my studies, I had an internship in a studio in London called Livingston Studios. And so I went to London and I was like, I'll give it a go and see. It was initially for 3 months. And obviously the internship went really well and they offered me some work. at the end of it. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna, stay here and see what happens. And literally 10 years later, here I am, still here.
Yeah. That was super short.
Super short. No. So then after I started getting work there, I it's word to mouth and you make contacts, and I got into sessions in other studios. So I was a freelance assistant for a long time in a studio called State of the Art Studios in London, as well in Richmond, and one in North London called Rack Studios. So I was working mainly in these two places, and then I think it was in 2015, I met a producer called Fraser T. Smith in a session at Rack, actually. And I was assisting his previous engineer at the time. He contacted me a few days later, saying that he was looking for someone to engineer at his studio because he had a studio in Parsons Green in London. So I did a few sessions as a trial, and he offered me a full-time job. So being his engineer for all his projects full-time. And so I've worked for 5 years, and he's a producer, writer. So we were doing a lot of writing sessions where I was engineering, and he did a few records, like including Stormzy, and I don't know if you guys know Dave as well, which is a very successful rapper here in the UK. So yeah, we did quite a lot of projects together, and at the beginning of this year, I wanted to go back freelance to get more into mixing and mastering. So basically, that's what I've not done many recording sessions since January. So I'm now focusing on mixing and mastering. And I've got my own studio now. I mean, it's a small mixing room in a studio complex in North London. So yeah, when I was working with Fraser, I was mixing quite a lot of things that we were doing, and I didn't think, I always saw myself as a recording engineer. But then I love mixing and mastering as well. So I feel like I've been an assistant and an engineer in studios like for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I wanted not a bit of a change because it's all linked anyway. But I just wanted to maybe explore like a slightly different path. And yeah, I've been really, really enjoying it so far. I mean, not saying that I would never record again. I mean, it's obviously, I will still do sessions and stuff like that. But yeah, I really want to get like into mixing and mastering properly. So yeah, that's been the journey, really.
Yeah, cool. No, that's awesome. And did you have a kind of musical background? Like, did you start with the creative process and then get into engineering, or straight away you were like, I just want to be an engineer?
I was playing classical guitar. I was classically trained when I was, since I was maybe like 8, or I can't remember now. It's quite far. Yeah, I was classically trained, so I played guitar for many years. And I started on piano, and then I went to guitar, and I did a bit of classical harp as well when I was, I don't know, like 13. And my parents they were not into the music business at all, but they were really musical. So like music was always a big part of my upbringing. And I was also very technical, so I was always into science. And yeah, so that sort of naturally went the sort of technical engineering route. And I wouldn't necessarily put myself in the producer category, even though I do, sometimes engineers do a bit of production in especially in vocal production, which I did do for a lot of things. I'm not really creating tracks or making beats or anything like that. And also I've realized that, like, obviously English is not my first language, and I always find it like hard to write like songs in English. I think I would be, maybe if I wanted to be a writer, maybe in French would be like an easier way. I think in English it seemed always a bit like, oh, I'm going to write something really basic and not getting
yeah.
the real subtleties to it. So I'm like, okay, not going to be a producer, not going to be a writer. I'm going to focus.
Well, you can always write in French, Manon.
Yeah, I guess so, but
Yeah, no, fair enough.
so yeah, so definitely, and I was always into the technical stuff, so engineer was definitely the right sort of path for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I can see your cat surveying the room in the background. That's great.
You're gonna hear like some meows in the background.
That's fine. Your cat can get a feature as well. That's all good. Yeah, so today we are talking about delay, like we were saying before. And yeah, it's really nice to hear kind of where everything started for you. And I'm sure you use a lot of delay in your work in vocal production and also in mixing, and have lots of stuff that you can share with us. So do you think you can start by defining what a delay is in one sentence?
That's actually, I was thinking about it. It's actually, I mean, it's not a hard question, but it's like you never really think about it that much because, you always use delay or reverbs is so part of your daily use that you don't really think about it anymore. So, I mean, for me, delay would be just repeating a piece of audio at, a certain rate, whether it's in sync with your tempo or not. So that would be my definition.
That's great, Manon. You know what? The short and simple ones for me are great. But people, it's so funny. I mean, you can kind of talk about really technical things, but then the one sentence definition seems to be what people struggle with most.
Yeah.
So that was really good.
Okay, good.
So repeating of a piece of audio basically is what delay is. That's great.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some settings that you would find across most delays? So you mentioned a couple of them.
So I find that I'm mainly mixing with plugins. So what I use all the time is the high and low cut filters on delays, because I find that if I don't high pass and low pass my delays, they sort of get in the way of mainly the vocal when I use it. So I tend to filter them.
Yeah, would you always add a filter when you're using it on a vocal?
Yeah, so I would usually cut the low end and the high end on the, at further as it delays. So the first ones will be a bit less cut, and then so it sort of diminish, like the tail of the delay, it's less noticeable. And so that gets a bit less in the way of the vocal. Obviously, something that I use a lot as well is the feedback knob or setting. And I find that often I automate it to get a bit more of an effect. So yeah, I would automate that along in the track to sometimes if I want a bit more of a feedback, then I'd sort of ramp it up. So I find that's the main two that I'm using the most. And then I can get into...
And would you say feedback is just kind of the number of times that it repeats?
That it repeats, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that and explaining those parameters. What would you say are the different ways that you might use a delay when you're producing or mixing?
So I usually have like a lot of delays set up in my sessions. So I always have a slap delay, which is a short delay that creates a doubling effect on the vocal. I have an eighth note delay, so that the slap can be like, it doesn't have to be synced to the tempo. It can be just like, 100 milliseconds or quite a short time. Eighth note is usually synced to the tempo, so whatever the tempo is. So I've got eighth note, quarter note, and half note delay. So they're always set up in my session. And then when I'm recording or mixing, I have all my buses ready, and I can just send, vocals or guitars or anything that I want to send delay to. I can just send that directly. And either I usually automate the sends as well and keep the returns at a fixed level. And I've got all those delays going into like an effects return bus. So if I want to like put them all down, then I can just do that in one fader. But that's basically what like the sort of the basic like template, if you want, of all the delays that I use.
Right. Okay.
And then I can get into maybe some more punctual effects delays. So basically I also have, because that's on obviously bus ends and aux returns, I also have audio tracks, which is basically doing the same thing, but it's basically audio tracks with a delay on the insert. And so it could be either eighth note or 16th sometimes as well. But those are more the sort of punctual effects. So it would be maybe happening like once or twice in the song. So I would basically copy a word or a small piece of audio that I want to have that effect on and just copy it down on the audio track. And I would have maybe like, a bit weirder stuff like a 16-note ping pong delay going into a reverb, something a bit more, not complicated, but something a bit more of an effect that you wouldn't put on a lot of things. It's just like little ear candy that you just have maybe happening once or twice. So it would be maybe going into, I don't know, reverb, then into a chorus, and that would happen like a little burst on something, and then that would maybe not happen again. So I have a few tracks like that, and those are not really fixed. They kind of vary depending on the song and what I feel like, oh, maybe I'll try that today, and if it sounds interesting.
So you've answered like 5 of my questions all in one big question, which is great. Right. Yeah, cool. So, you've gone through all the different ways that you use the delay in your or production template that you mentioned, that you have kind of like a slap delay, a quarter note and an eighth note, I think you said, for the vocal. And then you also use delays as an insert. Yes. In some of your tracks when you want them to just come in here and there, and also when you use them kind of with effects in a bunch of different places, and that's very song specific, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any kind of pairings that you use quite often when you're using it as an effect, like you said, delay into a reverb or something else that you quite like doing?
Yeah, so I can have maybe like the H delay, the Waves H delay, which is the one I mainly use all the time because I really like the sound of it. And like basically the two that I use the most are Echo Boy from Santos and H delay from Waves. And so I usually like maybe H delay going into sometimes Eventide Black Hole if I want like a big, like to make, so that gives it like a lot of space. Obviously the black hole is also on an insert, but it wouldn't be on 100% wet because I think you would lose the delay a bit too much. So I would maybe have it on like 30%, sort of like wet, dry, wet. So yeah, I would have like that and a black hole, or like Echo Boy with going into a Valhalla plate or a Valhalla hole. Same again, not fully wet, but then I also like on the H delay, I love the ping pong feature on it. So it's going like across the stereo field, which I really like. If I want something a bit slower or maybe not as a bit more subtle, because that's going like fully left and right unless you sort of reduce your panning. So sometimes I use Santos Pan Man as well. To give it a little bit of movement, and that you can really choose like the shape of the, I would say, oscillation. So that's a quite a good one. I would maybe have like a chorusy thing effect as well. So I usually have Santos micro shift.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a bit of that as well to give it a bit of a sort of like chorusy, doubly effect.
Like a delay into that?
Yeah, so everything's sort of going into it. And then when the delay is on insert, like the delay would be on 100%, but all the rest would just be like a little bit. So like, 20% or 30%. So it just complements the delay and doesn't like drown it out.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So like stuff like that. And then I would like automate in volume or, do creative sort of things. Mm-hmm. So I've got a bit more flexibility doing it that way with audio. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's pretty much.
Okay, and you can use delays. I mean, from what I've read about delays, which I just find so fascinating, like depending on the time or the rate when you're using it as a time setting rather than in sync with your project, the different times can do different things to your sound, as in kind of fattening and like a kind of bit of a chorus effect and that kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts for us on that, on like what settings you might use to achieve a certain thing with the sound?
Yeah, so on vocals, for example, if you get like a sort of 100 millisecond delay, that would be creating like a really close like repeat, and that would help like beefing up the sound a little bit, and that would create that. And that's what usually they used to do with tape, like when they were just running the vocals through and that was like just a tape echo. So that's great for vocals. Sometimes you can create like a fake stereo. I mean, it doesn't work all the time. It depends. It's kind of source dependent a little bit. But if you've got one guitar and you just duplicate the track and put like a very short delay, like I'm talking maybe 30 or 40 milliseconds on the second track, and sort of pan that, maybe not fully left and right, but maybe 40-40.
Yeah.
That would sort of create kind of a doubling effects, like if you double tracked maybe your guitar, and that would create a sort of fake stereo. And sometimes I do that to sort of make things like a bit bigger, or, if I want to take something, like have something a bit more interesting sounding, then I could do that. It's what, like microshift kind of works a bit that way. So, you can hear that the signal becomes wider with that sort of chorusy doubling effect. So that would be the two cases where I use like delays that are not sort of synced to the tempo. I think I haven't really done it with like longer delay times, because I think it gets a bit too noticeable, and it's, unless you're going for a very particular effect, then it's not something that I use so often. But if you do, let me know. If you find that
I will do.
Because the thing is that, I mean, I don't pretend to know like everything, obviously. So I'm always like interesting to hear also how other people use their settings and what they're doing, and I think that's how you develop your skills as well, is just to pick up
what others are doing,
things that what others are doing, and then trying it, and then be like, oh, that's cool, and then be like some stuff that I've picked up and I'm like, well, this is not really working for me, so you sort of try something else. But yeah.
No, I was reading the book by David Gibson, The Art of Mixing, and I remember one part of it where he talks about kind of pairings of effects that you might use frequently together, and then he's just got, and if you have any other cool ones, here you go, and then just puts his, I think, email address or number or something. He's like, tell me about them. So, for sure, like you can learn so much from how other people use the tools.
I mean, the kind of basic settings, I guess. And it's because it works with the type of music that I'm doing. I think doing sort of urban and like pop music, you don't have like a really, I would say it's not the same, but it's just maybe in more like experimental type of music or something, you would have crazy stuff that but that wouldn't necessarily work in the genre that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Some people would get like, I don't know, 3 tape delays, they would go like crazy with like feedback and, like stuff like that, which will work really well in the genre that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And one thing as well that you touched on was the different effects that you have to make a delay more stereo, like ping pong, and I've seen, mid-side or just stereo. Do you want to talk through like what they are and what you could achieve by using the different ones?
So I think if it's a slap delay, for example, on the vocal, I would keep that maybe in the middle so it doesn't distract too much and it just complements the vocal. Maybe if I want like have it a bit more stereo, I would like you said, use maybe a bit of ping pong delay or the Panman, the Santos Panman. Like sending it into a reverb works really well to get it like in the big space and to, but I wouldn't have that all the way through the track because it would be too much. So like some reverb, some choruses. I also like to use the S1 imager from Waves, which you can like adjust like it's just like a widening plugin. There's also one called Spread as well. So those are quite nice to really, if you want to, get the delay out of the middle so it doesn't actually interfere too much with what's in the middle, which is usually the vocal. So it's you can hear stuff popping in and out on the sides, which is quite nice sometimes.
And mid-side, is that one that you would use?
I'm not really using mid-side stuff that much for delays. I'm using it a lot on like actual instruments and stuff like that to sort of carve like instruments within the stereo fields, but not really on delays. But maybe I can start doing that.
Because of this podcast, just mid-side delay everywhere. Yep.
Yeah. I can maybe try that. I haven't really tried it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. So would you use a different type of delay to achieve different things? I know you mentioned you like the Echo Boy and also the H delay of Waves. Are they the only ones you use or do you like one of them for something particular?
I mean, it's usually the two. I mean, I'm really boring. It's the two that I really like the sound of, and sometimes, you like this. Those are the two that I like, and then I sort of go to them all the time. I've used the Roland, the tape echo, the 201, the real one, the hardware, and I love that. I love that as a tape echo on vocals. Obviously, it's a very specific sounding delay, but I love that. I also used the Binson Echo Rec when I was at State of the Arc, which is a slightly different. I don't think it's a tape. It's a slightly different like mechanism, but it's also like you can adjust different echo times, and it's a great sounding echo. I also use tape as well, like an actual like 1/4-inch tape machine, and just run vocals through and just print it back into Pro Tools, which I really loved doing. I think it's the number is 77, but I can't remember the actual tape machine. That will come back to me in a second. Yeah. But I love that, and I think it's great to bring like character to stuff and using like real like analog delays.
Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned that you have a bit of a template for vocals that you use with your delays. Are there any like particular aspects of a track where you often kind of go for a delay, whether it's a guitar or something else in your track? Or is it always really song specific?
I think it's usually song specific. I try obviously on guitars, like eighth notes or quarter note is always like a nice. Also, what I didn't mention sometimes is to have the delay, if your guitar is slightly panned left, to have your delay, like the return slightly on the other side. So that would like give it a little bit of like widening and So that's a good trick. And same for reverbs as well. That's quite a nice trick to do with guitars. Like it's that I do like quite often. I tend to not overdo it too much with delays because the vocals usually has quite a lot, especially in like pop music. The vocals will have quite a lot of effects and a lot of delays and stuff. So usually I try to keep it fairly minimal on the delay front on the other instruments. But I think that's very genre specific. Yeah, definitely. But I think for me, yeah, that would be like, and I think maybe just on guitars, like a subtle on maybe a piano. It's nice to have on if you have like vocal effects, like some like pitch down vocals or stuff like that, to have a bit of delay on those as well. That's quite nice. In the genres that I do, they always mainly on vocals and backing vocals. But I think you can get, if you're doing like a bit more like rock stuff or indie, you can get a bit more into that in your instruments, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. That's been really insightful for me on
As it good.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it's good to hear how other people use effects. So it's great to hear how you do.
Yeah.
And it's funny actually. I think sometimes things that you do all the time seem really basic to you, but when someone else hears about them, it's something new for them. So it's always good to hear what people do on a general basis, even if it's something simple.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think because you sort of do it without thinking about it anymore, that much. You don't sort of have a blank track and be like, okay, what delay I'm going to use. And it's nice to do that sometimes. But I think nowadays with efficiency and, everything has to be done so quickly, or in a session you have to make it sound, sort of mixed and done when they're listening back, so you have all this sort of ready to go, and you have to just push a fader to get it going. And I think, you sort of don't think about it too much anymore. But obviously along, it's all those years of like making it your own. You sort of like, okay, well, maybe I add a little bit of like micro shift on this one because I like the sound of that. And you sort of build it up to what is your, what you like the sound of. And then that's kind of what you work with all the time. But it's nice to sort of get out of that as well sometimes, to sort of challenge yourself and be like, okay, I'm going to change what I'm using.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, always I think you can come up with surprises when you force yourself to do something a new way, which is always interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'd actually love to hear a little bit about a couple of career questions. So what would you say has been your biggest challenge in your career so far?
I think the hardest thing, even though it was the best thing I ever did, but I think it was just to, move. I think the hardest thing for me was to move to another country and just give what I wanted to do a go. I knew that the music, the studio, especially the recording studio industry, is really hard to get into. And at that time, it was easier than I think it is now because there's even less commercial studios around. And at the time, I wouldn't have had the knowledge or the ability to sort of set up by myself and be like, oh, well, I'm going to build up my own thing. I definitely wanted to go into a well-established studio and learn from, because I had so much to learn. So I wanted to be surrounded with more experienced people and learn from, how to, record stuff and be in the studio. So I think that was probably the most challenging thing, to get into the industry and also stick with it, because, it's a great career path. It's quite difficult. Sessions are usually very long. It's like long hours at any time of the day. In the beginning, when you sort of looking for work and you have to, constantly find work for yourself and it's not financially stable, and you have to sacrifice a fairly big part of your let's say, social life, at least at the beginning, because you have to really, get the work in and make a name for yourself. So I think to have a sustainable career in that industry, I think it's quite challenging itself. So I think that's probably it.
Yeah. Just that little thing.
Yeah. And I think if you going, now that I'm going back freelancing and I'm going into a slightly different direction, it's also like, it's quite scary for me, because I was like, is that going to work? Am I going to find people to mix tracks for? It's like, how is that going to, work out? So, and I'm
sure you will, Manon.
No, but I'm getting a studio as well, so it's like, okay, well, I need to, be able to, pay your bills, and so it's definitely quite a challenge. And I think we haven't particularly touched on it, but obviously it's women in production. So when I started, I didn't know any other female engineers around me, so it was that didn't bother me too much, to be honest. And I've said it many times that I've only had good experiences, and I've been very lucky in that sense of, I never had bad experiences. But be the only woman in the room, and if you're the assistant, the one who doesn't have probably the least knowledge of the people in the room, and when something goes wrong, everyone looks at you.
Really?
And you have to, if it's something technical that you have to fix, because, so everybody sort of relies on you, let's say. So it's kind of challenging that as well. It's not being in the room where you have someone that, that's a woman, like another woman in the room. I think
totally.
It can be quite daunting for someone who's starting. I think now it's okay, but and I've known now a lot more women as well. So I know a lot more engineers, and I think women are getting even more into this now. So it's definitely better. But at the beginning, 10 years ago, I didn't know any. So it was definitely quite challenging, that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I couldn't imagine, and I started producing maybe 5 years ago, so it's not ages ago, but even then I definitely felt very intimidated, and so I'm sure the situation was quite different before that. And I think that's why it's so important, and one of the reasons this podcast was started, and even MPW in general, was to increase visibility of, hopefully people can hear this episode and hear you speaking about this as an experienced engineer and be like, oh, there is someone else out there who I can relate to, who is succeeding in this industry, which maybe before was a bit harder to find. So I'm sure, people get a lot of inspiration from hearing people like you and other people we've spoken to on this podcast. And I mean, what you said about taking a chance, whether that was moving to the UK or even taking the decision to go freelance, I feel like, for me anyway, every time I've taken that kind of decision that's been a bit scary and a bit gutsy, I think it's always worked out. You always get something from it, whatever that is. There's kind of always something good that comes out of it. So I'm sure, and as I'm sure there's always new opportunities at the end of that.
For sure. And I think if it's really what you want to do, I think you shouldn't be discouraged and keep going. You know. And I've failed many times at stuff and felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and but you just have to keep going, because I don't want to do anything else. So you have to make it work, and because I love what I do so much, and I enjoy it so much, that I don't want to do anything else. So you have to keep going.
Yeah. Well, I actually have, what is your biggest tip for people who are new to the industry? Is it that, or would you say it's something else?
I think probably in any kind of job, I think any sort of arts related jobs, I think it's the beginning is always very difficult because you have to, make a name for yourself. You have to get contacts. You have to build yourself. So it's tough. If you're really determined and if it's really what you want to do, then it will work out because you will put all the efforts in and the hours and stuff. And having a good support, even if it's not necessarily financial, but just like other people that understand what you're doing. Like I was saying, that it sometimes can be, you have to make certain sacrifices. And, for many years, I worked weekends. I mean, I still do, working weekends or last minute booking. Oh, well, you can't go to this friend's birthday, or, having people understand that sometimes you have to do those things because they're good for your career, and you have to, well, I won't be here for your birthday, or I will be working this weekend and I won't be going to, this or that. And having that support of either friends or family or either other people in the same industry that understand how it is, then I think it's quite important. Yeah, I think my advice would be to find what you want to do. And I think sometimes we want to do it all. We want to do too many things.
Yeah.
And I think for me, when I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to engineer. That's what I want to do. And I think getting all your focus into that, I know it's hard now because you have to be able to do everything, but getting really good in one thing demands a lot of time. So maybe, it's picking something that you really want to do. If it's producing, then it's producing. If it's writing or be a session writer, then go that. If it's engineering, or if it's mixing, or if it's like mastering, get into, because I don't know anybody who is like a writer, a producer, an engineer, a mixer,
Every
and a
single thing
mastering
in one.
engineer.
Yeah, for sure. I think, people just kind of put pressure on themselves to do all of those things just because, various reasons, budget, also just not kind of finding people that are on the same page or whatever it is. But I think that there's a lot of value to that on, try to not be the jack of every single trade. And
and I think you can find also people that will help you in the areas where you may be not as experienced. Then, you will find, if you're a producer, writer, but you're not very good at mixing, you can find someone that would help you and, get into, I don't know, a partnership or, a team or whatever the thing is. But, things like that, I think that not being scared of being part of a team. I think it's important. I think like being in a team can be a very, very strong.
Yeah, definitely.
So don't always feel like you have to do it all yourself.
I think that's great advice. That's really good. So we have 2 questions from our audience before I let you go. So the first one is from Sam Warren. So Sam asks, how did you get London grammar to sound so heavenly and all-encompassing? And I agree.
Thank you for your question, Sam. I mean, I think it's a lot of things. It's not only one thing, as you can probably imagine. So with London grammar, to give just a little bit of context quickly, it's basically, so I was assisting in the studio I mentioned before called State of the Art in Richmond. And they're not anymore, but they were like sort of vintage gear orientated. So they had a lot of like really old compressors. They had an EMI TG desk, which is like an old Rolling Stones, Beatles era recording desk. They had a lot of lovely microphones, like all the best microphones you can think of, they had it. So I think it's when a record at the end is, when you love the sound of a record at the end, it's a lot of things that went into it since the beginning. Obviously, there's the songwriting and the production. But on the sort of technical point of view, it's, what microphone did you choose to record the vocals, or what microphone did you use to record the piano? And I think it's just choosing the right microphones and the right like chains with preamps and compressors and carefully choosing all this over, a period of time that we were in the studio, which I think makes the sound of the record. And obviously they love reverb and delays, and so there was a lot used on those records.
Yeah.
And in Richmond they used to have like 2 big EMT plates, real plates, so we used that a lot. And they had like a spring reverb. Is where they used that tape, so they have a tape echo. They had that Binson echo rack. So a lot was used on vocals, on guitars, on pianos, on a lot of things to create that atmosphere. And I think after in the mixing process, then, obviously the mixer did also his own thing on it. So I'm not sure what he had it on and things like that. But I think, the end product is the result of all those
Many
things together.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I always, now that I'm mixing as well, I knew that already, but you realize the importance of the recording. And I think nowadays the recording process gets a bit like, oh, well, we just record whatever, like in the room and in a maybe non-treated room, and we just put this and that will be fine. And actually it just all matters, and it makes a lot of difference. And the quality of what you get at the end, really relies on how you captured it. And I think it's a really important step. And I think that really matters. So I think,
Lots of different things.
it's a lot of different things.
Cool. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then we've got one last question from Niem O'Sullivan. So Niem asks, what was the most pivotal moment in your career?
So I think there was a few. I think so basically, to go back to London Grammar, I was an assistant in the studio, and the producers, even though they're both very capable of engineering, they wanted me to engineer it. So that was actually the first sort of proper engineering job I had. So, and I think that defined quite a lot of what came afterwards. Because the album did so well, and it's such a great band, and it sounded good. And I think, that definitely helped opening doors for me to have done that. So I think that was the first one. And then I think the second one was probably meeting Fraser, because I sort of ended up working with him on like Stormzy, which has been like one of the biggest records that I've done, and he's been like critically acclaimed, and I've mixed it as well with him. And I think that was working with him, I think in general, like I've developed my engineering skills so much and developed mixing, and I think this all sort of lead into what I'm doing now. And I think meeting him and working with him, I've learned so much. And I've worked with amazing artists like Stormzy and Dave and Craig David, and like pop stuff like Ray and Mabel, and I've done like writing sessions with like Sam Smith and Georgia Smith and like a lot of great artists. So definitely that was a big
point.
What is it? Pivotal. Pivotal, yeah. Pivotal moment.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Manon. It's been incredible chatting to you.
Oh, thank you.
And I guess this is the start of your day. So what have you got planned for the rest of your day?
So I've got a few masters to do, which I'm going to do now. And actually I've done them already, but I'm going to check them. And then I'm going to go to the studio, and I'm starting an album mix this week. So I'm going to start working on that. And
Cool.
Yeah, so that's basically will be my day.
Nice. Sounds good.
What have you got
Sounds
planned
good
today?
Well, it is 9:00, so not a whole lot. Actually, I was mixing a track
it's the
yesterday.
end of your day.
Yeah, so I'll probably be going over that a little bit more today before I go to bed, and then sleep time.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope this was helpful in some sort of way.
I'm sure it was. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Well-
No, definitely. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me as well. It's been lovely.
All right, cool.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.